It's Wednesday, September 12th. Acting on two public interest litigations, a bench of the Kerala High Court headed by Chief Justice Hrishikesh Roy questioned the progress in the investigation into the alleged rape of a Kochi nun by Jalandhar Bishop Franco Mulakkal, 77 days since the police registered the nun's complaint that Mulakkal had raped her 13 times over 2 years. The 8-member investigation team have questioned her 12 times, taken a 114-page statement from her and other nuns at the Joint Christian Council convent, but questioned the bishop only once. Noting that the 8-member investigation team's report dated August 13 had found allegations against the bishop to be true, the bench asked why follow-up action has not been taken, ordered the government to submit a detailed affidavit on progress so far, and asked that the nun and her family be provided adequate protection from threats and intimidation. On Monday, the rape survivor's brother said the family had received death threats and even offers of land and money in exchange for a withdrawal of the complaint. In the backdrop of the investigation, nuns and members of the Joint Christian Council have been on protest over the last 4 days, demanding justice. Even as Mulakkal denied all charges, telling India Today that the nuns' accusations were, quote, a case of blackmail. Former Reserve Bank of India Governor Raghuram Rajan has written a detailed note to a parliamentary panel tasked with identifying the reasons behind the nearly 9 lakh crore bad loans, or NPAs. First, for those of our friends unfamiliar with banking terminology, what are non-performing assets, or NPAs? Now, there are two types of borrowers: retail borrowers like you and I who take personal loans, home loans, etc., and the big corporate borrowers. The bank earns interest on these loans. A portion of that is used to pay the interest the bank owes its depositors. The rest is the bank's profit. NPAs are a result of the bank's borrowers failing to repay their loans, which in turn means credit and growth will suffer. The gross non-performing assets of Indian banks is nearly 9 lakh crores. Now here's what Rajan said on why NPAs occurred. A larger number of bad loans were originated in the period 2006 to 2008, when economic growth was strong and previous infrastructure projects such as power plants had been completed on time and within budget. It is at such times that banks make mistakes. They extrapolate past growth and performance to the future. Indeed, sometimes banks signed up to lend based on project reports by the promoter's investment bank without doing their own due diligence. One promoter told me about how he was pursued by banks, waving checkbooks, asking him to name the amount he wanted. And then the global financial crisis of 2008 resulted in slowed down domestic demand. Once projects got delayed enough that the promoter had little equity left in the project, he lost interest. Ideally, projects should be restructured at such times, with banks writing down bank debt that is uncollectible and promoters bringing in more equity under the threat that they would otherwise lose their project. Clearly that didn't happen. But wasn't there corruption, cronyism involved? Remember, corporates make up 73% of Indian public sector bank bad loans, and these 12 companies alone make up 25% of NPAs. Reserve Bank of India data up to March 31, 2017 shows state-run banks have reported 8,670 cases of fraudulent loans, totaling up to 61,269 crore rupees in 5 financial years. In fact, collusion of officials from at least 3 state-run banks have been investigated in loan fraud cases. So Rajan says, unless we can determine the unaccounted wealth of bankers, I hesitate to say a significant element was corruption. Rather than attempting to hold bankers responsible for specific loans, I think bank boards and investigative agencies must look for a pattern of bad loans that bank CEOs were responsible for. Some banks went from healthy to critically undercapitalized under the term of a single CEO. Then they must look for unaccounted assets with that CEO. Only then should there be a presumption that there was corruption. Rajan also cautioned that laws like the Bankruptcy Code enacted in 2016 is being tested by the large promoters with continuous and sometimes frivolous appeals. It is very important that the integrity of the process be maintained and bankruptcy resolution be speedy without the promoter inserting a bid by an associate at the auction, basically by proxy, and acquiring the firm at a bargain basement price. A software patch that disables critical security features of the software used to enroll new Aadhaar users is freely available for as little as 2,500 rupees, as per a HuffPost India investigation. It can help unauthorized people based anywhere in the world generate Aadhaar numbers at will. What is a patch? A patch is a bundle of code used to alter the functionality of a software program. Companies often use patches for minor updates to existing programs, but they can also be used for harm by introducing a vulnerability, as in this case. In fact, hundreds of videos by private enrollment operators with steps on how to install the patch are available on YouTube. Operators no longer authorized to enroll people for Aadhaar told HuffPost India they can still generate enrollment IDs using the patch. The hack can defeat many aims of Aadhaar, such as reducing corruption and eliminating fraud in government welfare schemes, experts were quoted as saying. The world's youngest democracy, Bhutan, is gearing up for its third parliamentary election, scheduled to start on the 15th of September, while keeping an eye out for alleged Indian interference. The distrust has its roots in 2013, when India suddenly withdrew its cooking gas subsidy to Bhutan on the eve of parliamentary elections, plunging the country into chaos as the price of cooking gas shot up overnight. The opposition PDP made a meal of the matter, suggested that the ruling party was letting go of crucial ties with India and used it to score gains over the then incumbent DPT. While the Indian government maintained that the cut had been caused by accident due to miscommunication, it is widely believed in Bhutan to be a calculated attempt to dethrone then Prime Minister Jigme Thinley for attempting to form ties with China. PM Thinley met with Chinese Prime Minister Wen Jiabao on the sidelines of the Rio summit in Brazil in 2012, something India did not much approve of. While the manifesto of only one of the four parties contesting in the election mentions China in a line about border relations, all four give India the prominence it expects. Yet, as the countries head into 50 years of bilateral ties this year, India, that has been high-handed and often ignorant to Bhutanese sentiment, needs to tread with care. In July, the Border Roads Organization, which helps build Bhutanese roads under Indian project Dantak, painted road markers in shades of the Indian tricolour. Bhutan flinched. In April last year, India had to remove a board which read, "Dantak welcomes you to Bhutan," at Bhutan's Paro International Airport and paint over a board on an arterial Bhutanese highway that credited the government of India for its construction. Signages may not be big fish, but the road they point towards is one India should want to tread carefully, especially as cries of self-reliant Bhutan by 2025 this election has raised opinions within the country that Bhutan should veer towards avenues with China. Meanwhile, another rallying point of the opposition remains the ruling PDP's failure to bring down the country's debt. India, remember, remains Bhutan's primary creditor in the extension of significant hydropower loans.